Welcome to the SWIKE podcast, the only podcast that shares the stuff you didn't know you needed to know about jobs, careers, and life. The SWIKE podcast, the stuff I wish I knew earlier.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the SWIKE Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier podcast. We're here with one of our new guest hosts, Danny Tseng, and he comes to us with a background in architecture, plus a whole bunch of other things where he's an avid reader, he's going to publish a book soon, he's a chef, and a whole bunch of other things. So, Danny, if you can give us a little bit of an overview of what you're doing now, and then we'll go back in time to learn about Danny growing up. So what are you up to these days?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me, Luki. So these days I'm running a architecture and interior design firm with my business partner, Tatiana, and we focus specifically on commercial, retail, and residential type projects. And we love thinking about what's next, what's going to happen, just looking at trends, and then creating solutions that help address those things. We pride ourselves on being solutions driven. So anytime we work with a client, it's always about solving the issues for the end user and then creating a design that would solve those problems.
Cool. Yeah, and I'd love to go back in time and learn a little bit more about Danny as a kid. So what was Danny like growing up? What was kind of the earliest fond memories that you have? But what was Danny like as a kid?
Yeah, as a kid, so two phases. Phase one, I was born in Taiwan. So as a kid, I was hyperactive. I was running around all the time. And being in Taiwan is very dense. So the back alley of the town that I lived in was like a labyrinth. So as a kid, I would just roam in and then work through those labyrinths and then causing trouble in the neighborhood. Everyone knows me as a kid that just would go in and then terrorize the shop owners, but they all secretly love me.
Right.
And then I immigrated to Vancouver when I was 9, and that was quite big of a transition for me, going from having a tight social group where I was basically like the leader of the kids to not able to speak the language and then wearing funny clothes and getting picked on. And that was a bit of a shock for me. And then eventually in high school, I realized that I'm really interested in design, and architecture was something that I wanted to do, since it was a combination of science as well as arts. But also, I was also attracted to the fact that whatever I create can kind of be formed into reality, into built form. So it was a vocation that I chose for those reasons, and I've been doing it for over 10 years now.
That's amazing. So can you talk a little bit about that kind of first, I guess, interest and infatuation in design? So when did you kind of come to that moment where like, aha, this is what I want to get into? Yeah,
it's so like many architects, and I think with a lot of kids who aspire to become architects, we all play with Legos. And for me, I never follow the instructions. I was just, it's actually the first thing I throw out. I'll just pour everything into a bucket and then just build things from scratch. And I love the imagination aspect around it, and to build whatever. So the first foray, I would say, was that just being able to take these small building blocks and then to create a design. And then what really the next thing for me was in high school, I took a drafting class, and I really enjoyed the process of taking a vision or a design and then drafting something into technical drawings that eventually can be built. And when I did my undergrad, it actually wasn't architecture, but it was in fine arts. And I remember the prof specifically having a focus on thinking about the meaning behind the art pieces itself. And as the practice of arts, more than just about pretty pictures, but something that conveys meaning. So that was a interesting aspect that really stuck with me. And then when I was looking to apply for my master's, I looked into architecture a bit further. And that's when I realized that the notion of form follows function. So any sort of design that is created, there's a meaning and a thought behind it, and also a strategy of why we build things, whether it's to solve a problem, whether to address specific regulatory approvals or budget concerns, or just to craft an environment to elicit certain emotions for the people that use the space. And when I always remember when I stepped into the first house that I designed, that was being built for my own practice, and I did it while I was doing freelancing, working at like I was doing my own freelance, but also working at another firm. And the first time I walked into the house that I did on my own with my own clients, I'll never forget that feeling. It was just seeing the vision and everything that I put on paper come to life. It was such a elated feeling.
That's amazing. And I mean, I resonate with some of that in the sense that, well, growing up, I wanted to be an architect. I had like some blueprint drawings of my own kind of house with like a secret doors and passageways and stuff like that.
Nice.
I don't know where it went, but it was somewhere, and totally get the Lego thing. And I think for us, we were kind of lower middle class where we didn't even have a set with instructions. So there were no instructions to follow. So it was, building everything. And I actually thought that when Lego came up with all those kind of like all the instructions on the pieces, I was like, oh, isn't that kind of defeating the purpose of it when everything is kind of cut and dry? So I definitely relate to that. And I thought it was interesting that there's a drafting class in high school. We never had one in ours, so maybe it was specific to yours. But I'd love if you can speak to, and I don't know if you encounter this, where in all honesty, like fine arts isn't something that the typical kind of Asian kid is allowed to do, right? You're supposed to become like a doctor, lawyer, accountant, engineer. Was there support, or was there pushback, or what was kind of that decision like to go into a fine arts program?
Well, I did the fine arts program because I figured that I would be able to get a degree as well as a portfolio to get into architecture.
Okay.
So that was more of the angle. And in retrospect, I probably should have just gone straight to an architecture program, but that's in the past. So one of the stuff I wish I knew, just go straight into an architecture program instead of doing fine arts. So in terms of the support, I was also playing with the idea of going into marketing or being a graphic designer. So I figured the fine arts degree had offered more flexibility there.
Okay. And parents were good with that? They didn't have any issues, that sort of thing?
Well, I wasn't a very good student in high school, so I think they were just glad that I got into UBC at the time.
Right. So they're kind of saying, you know what, at least he got into something and he's gonna get a degree and all that sort of stuff. So were there any other kind of influences along the way? So it seems like that a lot of it was kind of self-directed, a lot of the courses that you took. Were there other kind of people along the way that helped kind of establish your interest in design, or mentors or things like that help you kind of progress and find kind of this interest in architecture?
Well, for me, it was my uncle, before he passed away, was a developer in Taiwan. And then I grew up seeing a lot of the architectural models, just seeing the scale. So that also always fascinated me. So that was also another component. And it was then reading about some of the great architectural works around, just reading those books as a kid, where it really got me inspired at architecture as a vocation, where I can take these designs and make it into reality.
Yeah, it sounds interesting. And then when we were connecting off air, one of the things that you mentioned is that as you kind of had your career in architecture, that there's a little bit of call it anxiety in the process in the workforce. So talk to us a little bit about that. So did it happen like while you were in school, or after, or later? And then how did you overcome it?
Well, I throughout. When I first immigrated to Canada, I touched on it very briefly that there was some bullying involved, and I ended up developing a social anxiety as well as a bit of a stutter. So going into the workforce, I realized that networking is going to be something that I need to be good at, and also I can't be hyperventilating from social anxiety if I'm in a meeting room. So I decided then and there to eradicate that, and I went out every single night, and for close to a period of 3 to 4 years, and I simply just read books on networking, and then apply those things that I read, and I just went out and did it. And eventually, I overcame it, but also got a host of contacts that some became my good friends, and some became my clients, and that was actually how I launched my own career as an architect. And that was also where I met my business partner as well. We actually met at an event in 2012.
Cool.
So yeah.
Yeah, can you walk us through a little bit about that decision? Because that you kind of glossed over. It's like I just made a decision, but like, what's going on in your head? Because previous to that, you said you were hyperventilating, you had lots of anxiety there, and just on a dime, or like, what were you meditating in your room? Were you just fed up, or how does that how does one come to that decision or make that decision?
Yeah, I was. There was a moment where I downloaded a game called Sim Life 2 at the
Okay.
time. It was a new sequel follow up to Sim Life,
Hmm.
and I was installing it. This was in the evening, so I lived in a condo, and I was looking at the night sky. And after work, since I didn't have much of a social life, I would essentially watch shows and play video games.
Okay.
And this was my last straw. At this point, I've already watched everything I wanted to watch.
Right.
And I finished the entire series of Lost in like 2 weeks, and that's
Okay.
close to 9 seasons. So it was like a lot of doing that. And so when I downloaded Sim Life 2, I figured since I didn't have a life in real life, at least my avatar would in virtual reality. So I
Okay.
watched the installation bar go from 10%, 8%, 20%. And then I looked out at the night sky and the silhouette of the city, the little lights flickering, different lives that people have. And then I looked over at the installation bar and it was now at 95. And that's when like something within me cracked. I'm like, no, like I need to overcome this. And I kicked the door of my condo open so far, it hasn't closed since. That
That's
night I
amazing.
signed up for 10 different networking events and it just haven't stopped from there. And yeah, that was the catalyst for it.
That's amazing. So can you walk us through kind of that first event? So you just kick open the door and you signed up for a bunch of events. The first event where you kind of like seize the day, let's just do it, or what was going on in your head? Kind of that first event, that first conversation, or you initiated, or did you even initiate it?
Mhm.
What was that experience?
Yeah, funny you said that. I paced around the venue for a good 45 minutes before I even had the courage to go in. And it was scary. And a experience that so I went whitewater rafting this weekend, and
Okay.
it was the first time doing it. It was at the Ottawa River.
Hmm.
And if the intensity of the river flow is of Niagara Falls is a 6, the one we went to was a 4.
Right.
So it's close to like as intense as it could. But the instructor told us that when you're in the rapids, when you see it, you have to paddle towards it. Like you have
Okay.
to run towards the danger, and you can't stop. And basically, you have to feel the fear and do it anyways. There's
Right.
actually a book called that. So if I could relate to those experiences, it was very much that.
Mm.
I was social anxiety, was terrified, but I just ran towards it. And it's Run Holiday talks about that in Obstacle as a Way, and
Hmm.
Stoics also talk about it. To like the obstacle of what you want to accomplish, oftentimes is the path forward, and the sense of discomfort and also fear is more of a signal for us to get to the other side.
For sure, and that's often some of the things that I work with my clients with, where usually if there's some hesitation there, that ends up being a challenge or homework for them, because that's probably
Mhm.
where the biggest
Exactly.
growth will be for them. So you mentioned a couple of books, and you were consuming a lot of information and some useful tips and tactics. What are some of those that you might want to share that were kind of the most impactful or helpful for you as you were embarking on this road to become an amazing social butterfly and a networking expert out there?
Oh yeah, there were a few, and actually no, there were quite many, but some of my top books that I would highly recommend. This is a classic, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. It
Sure.
talks about paradigm, and paradigm is basically kind of like your view of the world.
Hmm.
And another great book is Kirill Durett's Mindset of
Hmm.
adapting a growth mindset rather than a fixed mindset.
Right.
And that was what I took on. Basically, seeing that where I am previously doesn't define where I want to be in the future, and I simply just need to seek progress rather than perfection, and then move forward from there.
Sounds great. So it seems like that you were able to accomplish that, and you mentioned briefly that you actually met your business partner at one of the events. So talk to us a little bit about that journey. So you're right now working at a firm, right? Before that, now you're meeting all these people, and then what kind of got into you that said, you know what? I should start this on my own with the help of someone else. But how did that process happen?
Yeah, so I met my business partner in 2012, and we basically became like best friends at first sight.
Okay.
We got along really quickly, and she had skill sets that were different than mine. She's highly organized, and she's also very good at she had a natural talent for managing. So I figured that these are the right traits. And she's also an interior designer, and why do architecture? And in terms of architecture and building, we experience the building from the inside out. Even when we design, it's also always from the inside out. So I wanted someone who had an interior design background as well, who had a talent for management, and it was a natural fit. And it's funny, the second time we met, we were like, we should start a firm together. So it was always something bubbling in the back of our heads. That was kind of how we came about. And then we kept in touch, obviously became really good friends, and started collaborating on smaller projects while we were still working at our full-time jobs, so to speak. And eventually it got to the point where I just couldn't handle the freelance work while doing my full-time job, and I had to branch out. And then she joined me full-time 2 years after that, and that was how the cookie crumbled.
That's awesome. So talk to us about kind of that decision point to say, you know what, I have this safety net, my full-time job, but I'm doing a whole bunch of amazing stuff on the freelance side. So what kind of like broke the straw, or kind of allowed you to catapult yourself into that entrepreneurial space?
Well, that was always the plan, and I remember sitting at my last full-time job and just looking at people around me, and I see the advancements in technology that's happening, and I also see some of the things and processes that are becoming more efficient. So just to give an example, we were using a software called AutoCAD, which is very two-dimensional based, and then we started using a software called Revit, which is building information modeling. So you're designing the entire building in 3D as a 3D model, and then you extract the drawings out of it. And I realized that for my own freelance project, using BIM, I was able to create a drawing set 4 times faster than the previous. And it reminded me of the leap when we went from hand drawings to computer. So the leap after that, I think, would be AR, like artificial intelligence assisted design. So have smart machine learning that can help us design faster. What that also means is, yes, we're able to do it quicker and more efficient, but I think it also would affect the industry in ways where machines can potentially replace part of our workforce. And that's where I realized that I needed to start thinking about how to future-proof myself.
Right.
And there's a thought that I could stay at a firm for another 10 years or so, learn the ropes, and eventually open my own. But for me, I've always felt that if I were to do it on my own, I'll be able to learn things such as business, sales, and how to run a practice, even managing people. If I can, and I'm someone that learns the best from doing, and also my own self-education. Which I think was one of the reasons why I didn't get straight into school until I got into graduate school, which graduate school is more hands-on, where you learn things on your own with the critique of teachers.
Right.
And so I picked up a lot of skill sets that I learned on my own that benefited my business as well. And eventually had enough projects to run off on my own. And I was just looking at the timeline. Like, there's no way I can do these 2 jobs at once, and just decided to take the leap.
Sounds good. So before we go into the entrepreneurial journey, can you walk us through a little bit about kind of the first freelance engagement that you did? So I presume that you were working at some point and you said, you know what, I should do something on the side. Like how did you go about finding that first job, and what was that process to become a freelancer like?
Yeah, so my very first job was actually, so my dad's a real estate agent, and the first job was actually through a client that he had that wanted to rebuild over his property, and it was in Vancouver, so everything was done remotely. Okay. And like I said, when I walked into that space, flew in my mind. It made me realize that, yeah, this is what I wanted to do. But the project that allowed me to take off and work on my own was someone I met also in 2012, maybe the end of, like the beginning of 2012 also. And at the time, he was doing mortgages as well as smaller scale projects, but we always kept in touch. And then in 2015, 3 years later, he gives me a call and tells me that he's just purchased a property and he wants to develop the land into a multi-unit residential. And I said, okay. Well, and he wasn't ready to sign me on for the entire project yet. So I simply said, hey, I'll do a few designs for you. If you like it, then you can decide to go with us. Sure. So did a few design and eventually nailed it. And then I asked, hey, mind if I send you a proposal for the full scale scope of work? Mm-hmm. And he said yes. And I sent it to him. It was approved. And then I was looking at it, and it was a big amount and enough for me to go off on my own. And cool. So that was all through networking and just keeping in touch and just continuing to work on my craft.
That's amazing. So yeah, another point for the power of networking and staying connected, and also building those connections so that people know what you do. Because sometimes you connect superficially and they don't actually know what you do, even though you might have played basketball with them or whatever for like years on end. So sometimes exactly. Beyond kind of just the classical networking events and things like that. So, so walk us through a little bit about the entrepreneurial journey. So now you're starting your firm with your business partner. So I guess you were already freelancing, had a few gigs there. So what was kind of the first project that you collaborated with her on, and then how did you kind of grow? And I think you've passed your first $1 million and are continuing to grow and thrive. So what was that journey like?
Yeah, in the first few years, we're taking, other than that townhouse development, we're taking on smaller jobs. So offices and so as an architect, I deal with the building permits. So my business partner for her projects was working on the design. So I would overlook the drawings for building code compliance, as well as fire safety and so forth to get that approved. The first few projects were small, but we just kept on building our body of work, and we actually just finished or are in the process of finishing a 50,000 square foot office. Okay. But we started out doing like really small projects. There was one project early on we did with with someone I also met from networking that became a really good friend. So they had a concept that was a shaker bottle with a protein shake. So you're able to store your protein powder within the water bottle, and then at a push of a button, it releases the hidden compartment that releases the protein powder. So you can use that as a protein shake after your workout. Okay. So I saw their pitch on the Dragon's Den, and then 2 weeks later, I saw one of the partners there at an event, and I grabbed him. I'm like, "You're from the Dragon's Den." And then about 2 months later, we were designing their office as they were expanding. So that was probably the first project that I collaborated with my business partner on, and that was in 2014 while I was still working at my full-time job.
So well, walk us through that process. So you just recognize this friend, he has this kind of shaker bottle on Dragon's Den, and then automatically you kind of just pitched him to do their office, or like how does that process work?
Straightforward. Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, let me get into some more of the details. So people want to work with people they trust and people they like. So the likability factor was there, but as professionals, we're hard for our expertise. So I met him and then kept in touch as friends, but I would always talk about architecture and the interest in design and so forth. So when they were ready to do it, they brought us on. And a lot of what I do now is getting leads and also meeting people, but I say business development is very much like dating. The mechanisms are exactly the same. You open the interaction, and you build a level of attraction, and then you kind of have to qualify them to see if they're the right fit, and then you build that rapport, and finally, and you go for the kill. But sometimes, you might not have projects right away, but the intent isn't necessary to meet people specifically that you can get projects from. It's to meet people that you like and to build networks with. And if there's a project that's a right fit for each other, then go for it. But I never approach interactions thinking that I would get projects out of them or anything. It's more about getting to know them as people and seeing how we can improve our lives through interactions with each other.
For sure. One of the perspectives that I often share with folks on networking is to treat it like farming instead of hunting, right?
Yes,
most people hunt where they're trying to get the big game, the whale, the elephant, or whatever, whereas you come through and you nurture it. You give it some sunlight, some water, take away the weeds and cultivate it and whatever. And eventually, here's some fruit. Here's a new crop that you can have. And the great thing is if you do it over time, then the fruit keeps on giving. Right? You can keep coming back, where it doesn't have to be a one-hit wonder, that sort of thing, which I think is helpful. And like what you mentioned in dating, where oftentimes I recommend with folks in order to determine whether you're kind of networking correctly, relate it to dating, because oftentimes people are often looking for that one night stand, right? And going right after, hey, would you like to come back to my hotel room? It's like, I don't even know you. Like, why would I want to do that? Now it happens once in a while because that's how the world is, but it happens far less than you would like. So building those relationships, I think, are supremely important.
Yeah, that's totally it.
Yeah. So talk to us a little bit about now the growth. So you've started a couple of jobs. You're kind of building the momentum. You're networking a lot and closing all these deals, and then now you're expanding and growing. How big are you right now? How many?
We're a team of 10 right now.
Okay. So how did you get to the point of like hiring your first employee, that sort of thing? Because oftentimes that's when you're partners, you just kind of share the work or whatever. But hey, now we have enough business to pay someone and to hire them. So what was that process like to grow?
Yeah, so that process was we gotten a number of projects at that point, and we realized that we need help because I'm able to do it all on my own. And initially, it was actually tough for me because and I think up until earlier this year, it was so tough because I'm someone that prides myself on being able to figure things out on my own and being able to do it. And but that doesn't work when you're growing a business, because what it's about is teamwork, and it's about knowing what you're specifically good at and only doing that, and then give other people their ability to shine by allowing them to do what they're good at. So early on in the process, we for me anyways, I wanted to do a lot of the work myself, and but delegating is was something I've really worked on. And there was a really good analogy that I heard somewhere, like to really train someone to do something, you probably have to show them 15 to 30 times or so, and it might take you 5 minutes to explain it. And oftentimes it's easy for us to just take it and say, oh, you know what, I'll just do it, and I'll just do it myself. However, if they don't fully learn it and they don't understand it, it means that you'll have to keep on doing it for so many times. So it's a much better time investment to teach someone something that takes you 5 minutes, maybe 30 times or so. It's 150 hours for someone to really master that task. But you're saving heck a lot more hours by taking those 5 hours and doing it yourself, because you might have to do it, that specific task that takes you 5 minutes 100 or 1,000 times instead of having someone else do it for you. So understanding that, and then also giving people the ability to shine is something that we really brought on. And an approach that we took actually from Ray Dalio. I see that book on your shelf. The notion of idea meritocracy. So it's the idea that everyone, no matter where they're at, no matter what stage, has great ideas. And oftentimes, when our first employee was obviously young, so they have great ideas, fresh ideas, and they're very very passionate and ambitious. So we take everyone's ideas, and if they're good, we implement it fast. So we work through an idea meritocracy based system where anyone who has a great idea will implement it, and then pivot if needed.
Yeah. That's amazing. And for me, I think delegation was one of the hardest lessons that I had to learn as well. Because
Exactly.
to your point, like I can do it better than you. Let me just do
Mhm.
it, right? And the way that it was taught to me is my manager had said, okay, so let's imagine that you have something that it takes you 40 hours to do, right?
Mhm.
Or sorry, someone else 40 hours to do, but it only takes you 8 hours to do it, right? But and in addition to the 40 hours that the other person has to do, you have to check in an hour every day. So that's 5 times over the week in order to save yourself 40 hours. And would you do it? And the answer to me was like, no, because it only takes me 8 hours. It takes them
Mhm.
40. Whereas he said, you know what? Look at it a different way. It doesn't take you 8 hours to do it. It now only takes you 5 because you only have to manage them for 5 days and you gain basically 3 hours or close to like 40%. Why wouldn't you do that? And I'm like,
Mhm.
oh, right. And then when that kind of penny drops and that perspective shifts, like, oh yeah. And the thing is, that person who took 40 hours will eventually take 32 and then 24 and maybe never get to 8 like you, but eventually they'll get faster and better, right? And then they can
Mhm.
shine and maybe they'll get to 4 where they will do it even faster and better than you. And that's kind of the hope. So I love all that. And the idea of meritocracy, I think, is really great. Sometimes it's harder to apply when you're in a big organization there, but when you're kind of on your own and you have flexibility on the culture, I think that's helpful. So as we kind of close things off, so thanks a lot for sharing all of your experience. But what are some of the other kind of general SWIKE that you would want to give little Danny at various stages of your life, maybe moving to Canada or different areas where you've kind of grown? What are some of the SWIKE that you give for yourself over the years?
Oh my God, there's so many. Where do I start?
Well, you're going to wite a book about it, so you'll put it all there,
Oh
but
yeah,
maybe the
yeah,
top 3 or something like that. So
top three. So let's go with top three. If we recently, so first one I would say is action. Take action first. You
okay,
can know all the things in the world, read all the books, but if you don't take action on anything, it's useless.
right.
And a lot of people ask me about motivation and how to get it. And interestingly enough, action is something that builds that motivation.
Hmm.
Because and I would say consistent action as well.
Hmm.
So one thing that's really important is is accountability when it comes
Sure.
to business and anything in life. So whether you're able to be self-accountable or you get a coach to keep you accountable, an important thing is to build self-confidence within yourself and your own ability and build that momentum. And the best way to do it is by keeping by having tasks, whether it's small or like large size, but I recommend it small, like breaking large things into small chunks and
Hmm.
do it consistently. Because what you're doing is you're doing building a trust account with yourself that you can
Right.
get it done. So that would be the first thing. It's action first and then motivation, not the other way around. Trying
Right.
to get motivation and then do the action.
Right.
And the other thing is around mindset and also the importance of having an impeccable internal dialogue.
Hmm.
So, and also being impeccable with your words. So we all hear the term being a man or a person of your word, and it's how others build trust with you as well. So
Right.
respecting deadlines and doing what you say you would do, even showing up on time.
Right.
This is I used to never be on time until a few years ago, where I realized the importance of that, and my life really changed dramatically for the better. And once I realized the importance of my word, and another idea around that having a strong mindset is the internal dialogue. So we've all experienced traumatic events as kids growing up, or even at work, or any of those things. And those traumatic events are painful. But what's worse is suffering. And the suffering is the feedback loop that we replay to remind ourselves of that traumatic moments. And then I've certainly experienced it. I've would replay these moments in my head, and then I'll create stories around them about why I'm not worthy, why I'm not deserving of success.
Right.
And that's probably the most important thing that I would like my younger self to know, is that I can rewrite that story.
Mm-hmm.
We when we die, we see our life flash before our eyes. So in many ways, death is the final destination, but our life is the process.
Mm-hmm.
And I would rather watch a movie that I want to watch. And that also means that we're the actor, casting agent, director, screenwriter of our own life's movie.
Sure.
So being able to change our internal dialogue. So going from a negative mindset, like, oh, I'll never finish this, to instead of doing affirmations, oh, you're powerful, you're good, etc. I like to ask myself questions like, what would it take for me to finish this project right now?
Mm-hmm.
And then it instantly breaks me out of those negative feedback loops. Or if I'm out pitching to a client and the negative self-talk starts seeping in. Oh, they don't think I'm experienced enough. Maybe I'm too expensive. Maybe I'm just, and then stop myself there. Like, okay, I know what I have to offer. And the question I ask is, how do I tailor my services to solve this client's problem better?
Sure.
And just go from there, and not be so focused on the results, but actually focus more on delivering better results for them. And the last thing I would say is similar to the whole creative process, where we have a vision and then we run through the process of creating a final product. It's I truly believe that how you do anything is how you do everything.
Right.
So small tasks you do, whether it's like doing sloppy on your homework for your younger listeners, or like how you're late for a meeting with your friends. You can trace back to times where it's showing up in other places in your life. So that's where the consistency part comes in, and about finding these small things. So tying all those things together, these are the most important things that I would tell my younger self.
Yeah, I think those are all amazing points, very deep and philosophical at times as well. And I think definitely that consistency is something that I would echo. And something as simple as even making your bed when you wake up can apply to that, right? And on the mindset thing and the impeccable dialogue, I think, is that from like the 4 agreements? Or is
the 4 agreements talks about that.
Yeah, and so I think that's definitely one of those.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, and for me, for the action orientedness is there's the expression where knowledge is power. Well, knowledge is only potential power until you put it into action, right? So I think all those are great. And sometimes instead of doing like the ready, aim, fire, what you do is ready, fire, and then aim, right? aim for your next shot, because the first one probably won't be perfect. So you take a second one there, right? So thanks so much for sharing all your experience, your wisdom and insights, and hopefully we'll have you back for a future episode to deep dive on any of these things. But sure. Where can folks reach out to you if they want to get a hold of you, and what are some of the future aspirations that we're looking forward to hearing and seeing from you later on?
Yeah, so you can find us if you're on social media. We're called Syllable. So it's at syllable.design on Instagram, as well as LinkedIn and Facebook. And if you can drop me a DM through there. I'm quite active there. And as for future items we're working on, so top secret. You'll just have to follow us to see what we're up to.
Sounds good. So keep us in a little bit of suspense. So thanks so much, Danny, for joining us. And again, looking forward to hopefully having you back in a future episode.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Luki. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Danny.
Thanks for joining us on the SIWIKE Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier, the podcast. If you like the podcast, please subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you found this podcast. And if you can give us a review, that would be very appreciated. Feel free to contact me on LinkedIn at Luki Danu, LUKIDANU, and the same on most social media platforms. And I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks. Bye.